Welcome. I'm Jonathan Hudson, and this is Hudson Institute's Deep Dive from Jerusalem and Washington, D.C. And in today's edition, we're going to focus on the latest in the negotiations between the United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran on the latter's nuclear program. Where is Israel in this context? The situation, of course, from also an Iranian perspective on a regional scale, its proxies, particularly also in Yemen, with deep-rooted implications on freedom of navigation in the strategic Strait of Bab el-Mandeb, strategic power competition implications as well. All of that and more. First, let's introduce our panelists for today from left to right. Ms. Zineb Ribois, who is a research fellow as well as the manager of the Center for Peace and Security in the Middle East at Hudson Institute. It's great seeing you, Zineb. Next to her is Brigadier General in Reserve Yossi Koper-Vasser, formerly the Director General of the Israeli Ministry for Strategic Affairs, as well as the head of the IDF Intelligence Research and Assessment Division, and currently the president of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. And last but not least is Brigadier General in Reserve Dr. Amnon Sofrin, formerly the Chief of Intelligence of Mossad, as well as a senior officer at the IDF Intelligence Directorate. It's great to see all three of you. And I'll start with you immediately, Ms. Ribois. When we're talking about the negotiations, talks were taking place in the Sultanate of Oman on Saturday, following which we heard U.S. President Donald Trump coming out and voicing some optimism about the talks. What can you tell us on that?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I would say that they have made a cautious headway with both sides really calling for initial discussions to be positive and agreeing to continue negotiations. The U.S. delegation, of course, is led by Steve Witkoff, President Trump's special envoy, but also by Michael Anton, who is a senior State Department official, and he's providing more of a technical expertise on this. On the Iranian side, of course, there is Arakshi, who heads the delegation, and he's, from what I understand, the Iranians are very much concerned about the economic sanctions, and it seems that Trump is really pushing aggressively for the agreement and to block Iran's development of nuclear weapons. But that being said, I think it's very important to keep in mind that Iran has a weakened regional position, especially due, to Israeli strikes on Hezbollah and the collapse of al-Assad's regime. And so I think it creates an opportunity from the Trump administration point of view to have Iran make compromises and concessions. However, this is not really the first time that Washington tries to do something of this sort. And Israel now calling for tougher measures. I think we will see, a similar, at least that's how I see it, a similar path as Trump 1.0, where they would try negotiations or they would try to use diplomatic ways, but the negotiations themselves, they carry the risk of legitimizing Iran's nuclear ambitions and restoring its economic strength, especially because during these negotiations, it will be hard to put more sanctions, etc. And so it might enable Tehran to rebuild its regional influence. And so I think that this is a very tricky path that the Trump administration is trying to manage. Especially that let's not forget that for the Trump administration, the real adversary right now and the most pressing one, the existential one, is China. And China has really thrown its support behind Iran in this. I mean, they have also provided some sort of diplomatic support. The Iranians have visited the Kremlin, and right after they visited Beijing. And so there is this heavy alignment between China, Russia, and Iran, with China really being the backer because it buys a lot of Iranian oil, and I think this is some of the strategic landscape the Trump administration will have to deal with.
General Koper-Vasser, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in an address last night to a conference here in Jerusalem, highlighted that he expects at least from those negotiations, to ensure that Iran would not be able to enrich uranium, that it won't have an actual nuclear program that could lead towards nuclear weapon proliferation of a weaponized dimension. Do you see this as a viable ask at a time when President Trump seemingly needs a foreign policy win?
Also, thank you for having me. And it's a very good question. The point is that what is needed is really to make sure that Iran doesn't have the capability to have nuclear weapons by depriving it from its capability to enrich uranium. That's the right thing to do. Applying the Libyan model on Iran is the best way to guarantee that Iran is not going to have a nuclear weapon. That said, this optimism we see from President Trump and some of the things that Mr. Witkoff has said before this round of negotiations are causing some skepticism about whether we're going to actually be able to achieve this goal. And on the other hand, we hear Secretary of State Rubio saying that they still stand on this demand that the Iranians are not going to have the capability to enrich uranium. And we hear Arakchi saying, by no means, we are going to still have the capability to enrich uranium. So there's a lot of fog and ambiguity about where exactly do we stand on this issue. I think besides those who are really privy to the inside information, those who are following from the second and the third tier have difficulties to understand what's exactly going on. I think that for the Iranians, it's going to be the most important thing to save the face of the regime by saying that we managed to come out of it with some legitimacy to continue enriching uranium. And what the United States and Israel need to do in this respect is to limit very clearly the level of enrichment, make sure that any limitations on the program are going to be open-ended. There's not going to be any expiration date for the restrictions on the Iranian nuclear project, and that the verification of the inspection of what's going on to happen in this program is going to be tight and would be done everywhere and anytime, because we still have to make sure that before there's any agreement with the Iranians, we know all the details about their program. We still wait for the information about those 4 facilities that were not disclosed by the Iranians back in the early 2000s. And if we don't know what happened there, we cannot know that we actually control the program. So it's a lot of work ahead of us. And I hope that, look, we gave the Americans an unprecedented starting point by doing what we did in October and causing so much damage to the Iranian proxies ring around Israel, and that was supposed to serve as a deterrence against an Israeli or an American strike against the Iranian nuclear project. We gave the Americans, together with what they did with the sanctions, resuming the sanctions, we gave them a golden opportunity to put real pressure on Iran. That's why the Iranians decided to enter the negotiations. And I hope, and I think this is what Mr. Netanyahu was referring to, that I hope that the Americans will take this opportunity and make the best out of it and make sure that the Iranians don't have capability to enrich uranium, or at least put very strict restrictions on the way they are doing it.
Thank you, General Kupel-Vassel. General Sofrin, I'd like to ask you particularly on the nature of the relations between China as well as Russia with the Islamic Republic of Iran. As Ms. Zineb Riboua mentioned correctly, the main challenge for the United States today is no other than China, which is backing the Ayatollah regime in Tehran. But nonetheless, there is also a very unique relationship between Moscow and the Islamic Republic at this stage, and they are all in a concerted effort, indeed, trying to somehow challenge American diplomacy and reach a certain resolution that would not necessarily be in favor of the state of Israel, of the United States, and Western civilization at large.
First of all, let me say as follows. The the alliance between Iran and and Russia and China is very, very strong. That means first of all, if we look at Iran and Russia, this is a strategic alliance. They supported them in the fighting in Ukraine. They supplied weapon systems and advanced weapon systems, and they received advanced weapon systems in return. With China, it is more on economic calculations, mainly oil, but not only. They said other elements as well, and we saw what happened just yesterday on Bandar Abbas. The fact that the Chinese sent them kits for producing what we call ballistic missiles is a symbol, and it's not only economic calculation, but it's more strategic alliance together with China. Now, these two countries will protect Iran as best as they can. And that means that the Iranians now have to, first of all, negotiate with the US, because US is applying what we call coercive diplomacy. That means they deployed a lot of military units around the Middle East, and they enforced it, and they threaten Iran that, or the Iranian regime, that if you don't apply and you don't go into a negotiation and to get to some agreement, we will operate militarily. And therefore, we understand, as my understanding is that China and Russia will not stand aside and allow us and the Americans to destroy whatever is in Iran, because they have a lot of interest in Iran. So it can become something more broad than anybody expects right now.
Thank you, General Sofrin. Ms. Ribo, I'd like to ask you particularly on the collaboration now between the State of Israel and the United States when we're talking about the Iranians. Over the weekend on Friday, we saw U.S. Central Command Commander General Michael Kurilla visit Israel for meetings both with his counterpart as well as with Jerusalem's top defense official, namely Defense Minister Israel Katz, during the course of which they spoke about strategic issues, as they put it. Nevertheless, the Iranian file was in the forefront. Is this a deliberate signal to the Iranians in an attempt to further ratchet up pressure at this point in time? And do you see this somehow also accommodating the talks that are currently ongoing?
I would say that it's very difficult to assess in general, but I I suspect that definitely. I mean, Iran is so weak militarily, but also domestically, to the point where I guess for the Israelis, the point is how is it possible to help the United States capitalize on this weakness and make sure that the region is more stable? And I think this is one of the priorities right now, and I guess that for the Trump administration, it's on a similar wavelength. And I would say that there's also the Syria port problem, where, of course, the United States is pushing more now towards a certain accommodation between Turkey as well as Israel. There's talks in Baku and so on. And so I guess that there are several files or portfolios that Israel and the United States ultimately have to collaborate on. And of course, it's a signal to Iran, given the talks, but I think it's a signal for the region in general, since Iran is a problem for not just Israel, but all of its neighbors.
Absolutely. Well, General Kuperwasser, let's shift gears to the Horn of Africa, particularly to the Arabian side of the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb, where we're seeing the Houthis continuing to intensify their efforts to survive in the context, of course, of the U.S. Central Command ongoing aerial and naval campaign against this Iranian proxy. They claim that they are acting on their own, but naturally the Islamic Republic has been the one to provide them with all dual use as well as intelligence to be able to sustain thus far. How do we see the American operation accommodate a certain effort to further degrade Iranian capabilities from a regional perspective?
Well, first of all, I must say that following what General Sofin said, that coercion is now being employed not only in Iran, against Iran, but also against the Houthis, of course. There's an effort to put a lot of pressure on them in order to bring them to the decisions that they are doing the wrong calculation in continuing the war and convince them to stop it. But the Houthis they have a very high level of readiness to suffer, and they keep on. And of course, it's very difficult for them to stop at any point, because if they stop, then why didn't you stop before and save yourself some misery? And so it's a sort of a gambler's syndrome that leaves them with this continuation of atrocities against Israel and against the coalition led by the United States. And that forces the United States to keep on with its airstrikes against targets in Yemen. And we see that they pay a very heavy price. They do not succeed in charging a price from their enemies. So it's a very problematic situation for the Yemenites. Sorry, for the Houthis, for the Houthi Yemenites. And more than that, they are now facing the possibility that the other elements operating in Yemen are going to take the initiative of a ground offensive, which is going to change dramatically the situation. I guess if they are going to see that such a ground offensive is really underway and threatens their ability to control strategic parts of the territory they are in charge of now, then they might look at it differently. But so far, even though everybody speaks about it, it doesn't happen on the ground. So maybe they can try and gain some more time. The price they're paying is very heavy. And we see the explosions over there. It's amazing. But still, you listen to their leaders, and they speak as if they're ready to go on with it. It's always like that in a coercive effort, that you never know when is going to be the time when somebody on the other side will say, okay, enough is enough. We saw the Hezbollah leadership doing that, and in a way that led to the ceasefire that we have, so-called ceasefire that we have with Lebanon today. We haven't seen yet Hamas doing that in the way we want. We haven't seen yet the Iranians doing it the way that we want. We saw some signs of readiness to accept that they have to change course in showing readiness to join the negotiations, but not about the topics themselves. And in Yemen, it's very difficult to convince them to give up. We'll have to wait and keep on the pressure.
Absolutely. Of course, the American pressure is making some significant gains, particularly for the confidence of the council that was established, the internationally recognized council or government that has thus far sustained many attacks from this Iranian proxy, but nonetheless, now with the American support, may launch a counteroffensive, as you mentioned. General Sofrin, on that part right now, just for the sake of our viewers, there are approximately between 31 to 33 million people living in Yemen. Some 20 million of them are under Houthi control, and the Houthis, even though they do control a large part of western Yemen, they originate from a small governorate called Sada, and it seems like at some point, if there's going to be a counteroffensive with the support of American aerial and naval superiority, this could significantly shift the whole calculus for this area, an interest not only for the United States, but also for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, as well as for other Gulf nations.
First of all, if you look at what happens in Yemen, there are contradicting opinions of the success of the American attack. Some people tend to say that it is very successful, and it bears a lot of fruits, and killed many people and demolished many sites and so on. But nevertheless, they keep on launching missiles into Israel and UAVs without any break. That means they have the capabilities that are undestroyed. And the other opinion tells that it's not very successful. It's only striking only from the air, and we know it from our own experience in Lebanon on the Second Lebanon War, is not enough. That means if you want to take them down on their knees, you need to have boots on the ground. Without that, you can attack them a lot, and they are very stubborn and they're hard killers, and they won't give up very soon. On the other hand, I don't see the government or the government armed forces of the what we call the legitimate Yemeni government striking so bad with their own capabilities only and succeeded in getting to Al Qudayda or other places on Western Iran, on Western Yemen that are being controlled by the Houthis. And therefore, I think that it needs more time and more efforts to be able to launch such an attack that in the end will dictate that the Houthis are retreating back from some of the areas that they control right now. And I think we have to wait and see because it's not a short story.
The Iranians are, of course, not sitting idly by and looking at this unfold. They are quite active in Misri Bua, since we don't have very much time. Nonetheless, I think it's important to touch also on the Somali aspect here, since the Iranians have been quite robust in their efforts to both bolster Al-Shabaab operating in Somalia, as well as the Islamic State, as was alluded to by Dr. Sebastian Golka, who is the National Security Council's Senior Director for Counterterrorism in Washington, D.C. When you look at Somalia, naturally it is a country in quite a fractious position from Puntland to Jubaland, so as well as Somaliland. Those various tribes operating there are very contradictory in essence, but nonetheless, the main goal of the United States of America, as was articulated by President Trump's team, is freedom of navigation. And therefore, if we do see now bad actors on both sides of the Red Sea, on both sides of the strategic Strait of Bab el-Mandeb, this may further frustrate efforts to ensure freedom of navigation after so many months that Iran has successfully managed to prevent many Western vessels from transiting those very important shipping lanes.
Yes, as you said very clearly, the priority for this administration is really to push towards the counterterrorism operations. I mean, for a long time, having 70% of the merchant traffic in the Red Sea being disrupted with millions of dollars wasted every single month. It is absurd for the United States to see that, especially that it doesn't just weaken the United States' strategic posture, but it also weakens its allies. So I think that this is the first part. Of course, terrorism is a big part of it. But on Somalia, I think there is another part where the Trump administration, whether intentionally or not, have assessed that, whenever Iran uses a proxy, it has a political and a military goal. The political goal here is to really alienate every single country in the Horn of Africa to the point where they will have to deal with Iran. Let's not forget that Somalia is also on the list of the countries that can maybe be part of the Abraham Accords. The fact that Al-Shabaab and the Houthis have collaborated is therefore not really a coincidence. It's really part of a bigger plan. This is how Iran has always operated to make sure that the countries it targets do not have any sort of relationship with Israel. And so I think that there is this part too where making sure that proxies do not operate has also a political objective on the long run.
General Cooperwasser, in one sentence, please, when we're looking from an Israeli perspective, is this a situation where Israel says the United States will deal with this issue and we will try and accommodate its operations as much as possible from an intelligence perspective, but that's as far as we go per the American request?
In one word, yes. That's what we're doing. We support the American effort and we count on it. We have other areas where we have to concentrate, Gaza and Iran maybe in the future, and of course Lebanon and Syria. These are closer to us and more important at this point, and the Americans are doing a good job. what value added do we have? They carry out so many attacks. So another attack by an Israeli aircraft is not going to make much difference. And that's the policy we have. Must say that following what Mr. Ribua said, that yes, the Iranians are trying to have some influence in this area of the Horn of Africa, but the truth of the matter is that they are losing so much. So this is not necessarily going to compensate for the losses they had in Lebanon and in Syria. And they are suffering. They're suffering a lot, as she said correctly. And this is the most important element in this picture. The Iranian axis is falling apart.
Dr. Sofrin, half a sentence. You only have 20 seconds. Go ahead.
I think that we all understand that the Iranians are trying to hold on and to survive, and therefore they're negotiating with the Americans, are trying to hold on with the Houthis and to try to build some another infrastructure, but they're losing right now.
Well, this is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to thank Brigadier General in Reserve Dr. Anon Sofrin, Brigadier General in Reserve Yossi Cooper-Brasser, and Ms. Zineb Ribua for all of your valuable insights. I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. This has been Hudson Institute's Deep Dive from Jerusalem and Washington. Until our next edition. Have a good day. The Middle East, home to the cradle of civilization, retains a reputation from time immemorial as one of the most complex, conflict-ridden regions of the world. A cluster of nations, religions, powers, and influences, Mideast intricacies pose conundrums to even the most astute individuals. Bombarded daily, indeed every minute, by a barrage of information, some accurate, yet most of it less so, TV7 Israel invites you to watch and hear some of the most knowledgeable experts, most of whom partook in creating policies shaping this region today. Join us for Jerusalem Studio every Tuesdays and Fridays for content that truly matters. For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at www.tv7israelnews.com.